coming? I don't know. Okay. Welcome everybody. We're on Daf Yud Amud Bet, about 12 lines from the beginning of the page, where we have Reish Lakish quoting someone. Well, maybe I'll read a little bit since you guys are reading other stuff. Right, if we're going to see this Tosfot, the first Tosfot is Jacob. Okay, so let's start here. Amar Reish Lakish, Mishum Abba Kohen Bardala. Tana, Ein la chatzer ve'ein la arba amot. So a child, she doesn't have a female child. She doesn't have a courtyard, and she doesn't have her arba amot, which are in the Reshut Rabim that she could like acquire through in the sod of in the tzidei Reshut Rabim, or in the alleyways, the simtaot. She doesn't have her arba amot to acquire things, and we're talking specifically about a get because that's why we're interested in whether a katana has, particularly a katana, and whether she has acquisition. Rashi says, katana ein la chatzer. Right, that's what Reish Lakish is quoting. Ein la chatzer. Rashi says, im zarak la ba'ala get letoch chatzera lo kanta la chatzera leitgaresh bo. She can't acquire the get, which she has to, in order to be divorced. So she's not divorced. V'ken im haita omedet b'reshus rabim, and I have to say Rashi means a simta according to the previous Gemara, or a sad on a side of the Reshut Rabim. V'zarkola get ba'arba amoteha. V'afal gav de gedola migarsha. Even though for a gedola this would work to get her divorced, keditanan hazorek get leishto b'toch beita haita omedet b'reshus rabim v'zarkola karovla migureshet. You see that it does work for an adult, but it doesn't work for a child. That's the opinion that Reish Lakish brings us. Rav Yochanan brings a different opinion.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is just the assumption the only way a katana would have a chatzer is through a Yerusha? Or like, can a child acquire a chatzer through any other way?
That's an interesting question. I believe that there is kinyan for a child. I mean, that's the famous problem of giving a lulav to a child, is that if you give a lulav to a child, he can't give it back to you.
No.
Well, he can acquire, but he can't
yad. So
what?
Later it does talk about yad. So I guess I was just wondering, is that they fully have kinyan the way anyone else does? But no.
Yeah, I think that children could have a kinyan. I mean, she'd have to be some level of age. Maybe a 10-year-old child could have. Lexi, what do you say?
In general, this will come up later. And also when it comes to the status of male versus female child kinyan, but it's a takanat rabbanan, at least when it comes to, like, I'd have to double check to what extent we applied this across the board, but at the very least when it comes to, for example, Metzias, we've seen that a katan can only acquire from a takana, but mida oraita they can't acquire like a Metzia. And so I think that actually applies to most instances, but I do think that it might have to be a case of like Yerusha. As no one said, there's also obviously the idea of like yitav chatzira bayin ke'echad sort of thing.
Okay, it could be that her get, let's just say maybe she acquired the get and the chatzir at the same moment, or it could be a Yerusha. Potentially, it could also be that she acquired it some other way, but that's not the. I mean, you're right. The Gemara here is assuming that she can own a chatzir, and also the arba amot is also a takana for sure. That's a takana, right? For sure, arba amot v'reshus harabim is a takana, and yet you can get divorced with it, even an adult. So you see, there's no real problem that it should be a rabbinic acquisition for a deraita procedure, which is right. You might say she has to acquire it. You might say no, mapito. The rabbis can't create a rabbinic procedure that in the Torah is not recognized to do a Torah action. But no, they can. Certainly, her arba amot for an adult woman would work. It's interesting idea. Just thinking about the famous thing that the Rambam says that Kesef Kedushin is B'divrei Sofrim, and everybody tries to explain it. Lots of things written about it, and they try to say, well, Divrei Sofrim doesn't mean it's D'Rabbanan. It just means the rabbis taught us through their methodologies. But you could take it. I mean, I don't want to get into this discussion, but I'm just posing as food for thought that maybe it is really Mamash D'Rabbanan, but it still works. It still makes it a deraita marriage once the rabbis say that Kesef Kedushin works. Except that the limud seems to be deraita limud. Anyway, but whatever. Here he seems to be, to answer your question, even though it's a rabbinic acquisition, yeah, she can acquire just like an adult. But Reish Lakish says no, she can't. Reish Lakish brings an opinion that she can't. Now it comes along Rav Yochanan and says, Mishum Rabbi Yanai, Amar, Yesh lachatzer v'yesh la'arba amot. Okay, no. He says no. She has just like an adult. The Gemara goes on. B'mai kamifligi. What is the basis of their argument? Mar savar chatzer mishum yada itrabai. The one opinion. Which opinion is this? Well, we'll see. It's Rav Yochanan. It's Rav Yochanan. Mar savar. Chatzer mishum yada et rabbi. Ki hechi de itla yad. Whenever she has a yad, chatzer nami itla. Umar sover chatzer mishum shlichus it rabbi. V'ki hechi de shlichus leisla. She has no shlichus. She can't send a shliach. Chatzer nami leitla. She also doesn't have a chatzer. So the first opinion is Rav Yochanan, who says that she does have it because it's like her yad. She has a yad, so she also has a chatzer. Why does she have a yad? Because she can acquire things. You can divorce a woman or a girl who's 10 years old, as long as she understands that she's being divorced. So that's, if you look in Rashi, Mishum Yadai Trabai, look at the Rashi there. Dikativ v'natan biyada v'yada reshut mashma dikativ v'ikach et kol artso miyado. So it's, again, it says you should put the get in her hand. And when it says hand, it doesn't mean literally hand. It just means her reshut mashma. And what's his proof? Veikach et kol artso miyado. It says in Bamidbar that I guess Moshe took all the land. I don't remember exactly the case of maybe it's Og, I don't know, or somebody Sichon, and he took it miyado. Obviously, he didn't have the land in his hand. He must have. It must be a figurative meaning. It means he took it from his reshut. So you see the word yado is figurative. Did anybody look at the source of this? If you all have Oz Hadar, he tells you where to go. Did anybody look at the source? Now, let's take a minute and look at the source, because it's really unusual what Rashi's doing here. So it's in Bamid. If you don't have those Hadar, I think it's Bamid. It's Bava Metzia. Nun Vav Amud Bet. So you should all have Bava Metzia. Nun Vav Amud Bet. And here, maybe I'll Aaron, you want to read the Gemara? We're all nobody's prepared, but I'm sure you'll be able to read it.
Yeah, starts
10
with
lines.
Tanya.
Actually, just start at. Well, I think we can start at like about 12 lines down. I didn't count, but about where it says Achiv lo hikdash or hekdesh. Velo Achiv velo hekdesh. It says matkif la. You see that?
Amar kra echav velo hekdesh. Matkif la Rabba bar mamel. Kol hecha dichtiv yado mamashu. Wherever it says yado, we're talking about a real yad. Rashi says yado mamashu. The kedayak la'el miyad amitecha mitaltalim davka anik.
You don't have to read the Rashi. We don't have to read the Rashi, even though
so
it's
we're
actually
talking
here
about
on Rashi.
things that have to do with real hands.
When it says anywhere where it says yad, it's to be understood as talking about a hand.
Yad mamash. V'ikacha kol artzam yado. Hachinami de kol ar'e biyade hava.
Wait. Ele me'ata diktiv. Sorry, I'm a little bit slower than you.
Ele me'ata, but now that would imply that when it says, and he took all of the land from his hand, that it literally means all of the land that he took was literally in his hand.
And it's saying that's a tmiya. That's a tmiya. In other words, v'ikach kol artzo miyado.
The land was not.
Hachanami kol artzo biyado have nakit. Did he really take the land from his hand? It's impossible. Ella
mirshuta. Hachanami mirshuta. V'kol hecha dichtiv yado lav yado mamashu. Rather, it means from his domain. So, in our case, it means from his domain. And wherever it says yado, it doesn't mean a literal hand, but rather domain.
Now go on.
V'hatanya.
So wait a second. Let's just summarize. Before you go on. First of all, we have Rava bar Memel or Mamel. I like to say Memel because Memel is the city in Lithuania where part of my family is from. So let's call him Rav Memel and say he's a real Lithuanian, or Rava bar Memel. And he says that it can't be. Well, what did he say?
He says it's yado. Wherever it says yado is yado mash. Then
Stam
objects.
The Stam objects, okay. And the Stam concludes what?
The Stam concludes it's not yado mamash. Actually, whenever it says yado, it means mirshuto or rishuto.
So why is this?
Now we're going to get.
Okay.
Now
fine.
we're going to get a braita that presumably is going to be a point where it actually must be yado mamash.
Right.
So if the object is found in his hand, I think this is with gneva, right? If the object is found in his hand, I only know now if the object is literally found in his hand. Gago chatzero v'karfefo minayin Talmud lomar im himatzeh timatzeh. So where do I know that if it's found in his possession, but not literally in his hand? Where would I know that? And it's from the ribui of himatzeh timatzeh, meaning that this braita assumes that yado is his literal yad,
which is what the Gemara is about to spell out.
Mikol makom tama dekatav rachmana im himatzeh timatzeh halav hachi havamina kol hecha dekatav yado mamash.
Oh, so now we say no. Yado is mamash. This brisa, what is this brisa assuming? It's assuming that yado is mamash, and because we have imatzeh timatzeh, we can include other things. But if we wouldn't have had that, when it would just be yado, and then we bring another brisa.
This brisa is a challenge to the Stam's earlier position.
Exactly, and it's in accordance with Rav Memel. Rava bar Memel. Go ahead.
V'tu Tanya. V'natan be'ada. Inli eliyada. Gaga chatzira v'karfifa minayin. Talmud lomar v'natan. Mikol Makom, Talmud dekatav
No, not
Rabbanan
Talmud Lomar. You got to read it like this: Talmud Lomar v'natan mikol makom. You gave it in any sort of manner.
Talmud Lomar v'natan Mikol Makom. Isn't there a comma?
No, I don't
between
think so.
Natan
I
and-
think it's also the previous one. I think it's Talmud Lomar Natan mikol makom. Torah is saying you gave it in any case. And then why is that? Taima diktav rachmana v'natan ha lav
halav hachi hava mina kol hecha dekatav yado mamash.
Okay, so now we have these brises that prove that it means yado mamash. Now read the last bit here, and this is actually the kicker.
Ela kol yado mamash. Rather, actually, you should say we're always going to go with Rabba Bar Memel. It's always yado mamash. Who? B'shani hatam deleka l'meimar hachi ela mirshuta. And the only reason in this case of Veikacha kol artso miado is it literally couldn't be in his hand, so you know it's not his hand.
Right.
So our
In other
default
words,
is hand is literal unless it's impossible.
Exactly. So this is actually very interesting on hermeneutics of reading the Bible or any text about yado. We're always going to take yado to mean literally yado, unless where it's contrary to reason. But we're not going to use the fact that it's contrary to reason in one place to say that in all places that's true. So is there any limud then from the case of Bamidbar? Is there any limud to other cases from the case of Bamidbar?
Potentially, we would know that any other place where it's
Any other place
where it's not possible.
Where it's not possible, it has to be. So we go back to our Rashi. Go back to our Rashi, and Rashi said, I'm on Adaf Yud Amud Bet, and he said, Mishum Yada, the Kativ Natan Biyada Reshut Mashma. Why is it Reshut Mashma? Not because of the word Yada, but because of the word Vanatan. Vanatan Mikol Makom. That was the drush over there. But Rashi changes it up, and he says, no, it's because it's written in this verse, Vayikach et kol artso, which teaches that yad cannot be yad literally, but it means reshut. Rashi is incorrectly paraphrasing the Gemara, right? He's incorrectly summarizing the Gemara. I mean, I'm saying it in a mean way, but I don't know. It reminds me of the Rambam. This is the way the Rambam sometimes learns a Gemara. He just takes the parts that he wants and puts them around. This is a very weird Rashi. Very weird Rashi. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Aaron.
Maybe the reason he's changing it is it seems like otherwise there's a kasha between the two pieces of the Gemara. Because over there we have very clearly V'natan be'ada. Yada is Yada mamash. And here, the pasuk, it doesn't quote V'natan be'ada, but the pasuk in the Gemara that would lead us to be talking about Yada is actually clearly not literal. And so otherwise you'd have to find a way of resolving the two Gemaras.
Well, I mean, let's read the Gemara and
out.
try to read it the way I would want to read it. If I would read Rashi, I would read it to say, what are we quoting here? We're quoting here, Mishum Yada Itrabai. So let's go back to the Gemara. So who was this opinion? Rav Yochanan Mishum. Right. This is Rav Resh Lakish in the name of Abba Kohen Bardala, and he said. He said, Mar Savor Chatzer Mishum Yada Etraba. Ki hechi de itla yad, Chatzer nami itla. So wait, so that's Rav Yochanan, sorry. So she has a yad, so you could just say he learned it from yad, but right, the Gemara seems to emphasize the word yad. Mishum yad itraba. But it's actually not really true if we looked over in the Gemara. It wasn't Mishum Yad. It was Mishum Natan. It was Mishum Natan. So what you're saying is that Rashi isn't tricking around. The Gemara is tricking around. The Gemara is a little bit problematic. The Gemara should have said, I mean, how? It's just weird. It's coming out that Rav Yochanan is learning a limud that it is from Yad. So he's like learning like the opinion in the Gemara over there. See what I'm saying? Rav Yochanan, what Mapitom Rav Yochanan is learning from Yad. He should have learned it from V'natan b'yada. That's what Rav Yochanan should have said. So Rashi is really just coming to gloss, maybe, I don't know. He's coming to defend Rav Yochanan, gloss over the mistake here. I don't know. Wait, Alice, you're scratching or you have a question? Or you have a comment? Wait, Aaron, go for it.
I think that's also why whoever is editing the Elizabeth Hadar didn't put a note on Yada as leading to the pasuk, because if Yada leads to the pasuk, then it would be problematic. So Yada has to be, at least as the editor of Elizabeth Hadar is reading it, Yada is not a quote from the Tanakh, because then there would be a problem with the other Gemara.
Well,
Okay.
this also, I double checked this. This is, a couple people raised this challenge on Rashi, and I think one of the answers, the Pnei Yehoshua says Rashi is explaining according to our Hava Amina, right? That like later on in the Gemara, we'll see that Yada is a ribui, right? It's not that like there is something intuitive about Yada automatically means Rashuta. It's actually that it's a more sort of formalistic derivation of a ribui, if we say that's how it works. But that we don't know that Baraita yet, right? At this point, this is one of the cases, according to Pnei Yehoshua, of Rashi not spoiling the Gemara for us, right? That there's cases where Rashi already tells us what's going to happen later, and there are cases where he goes by the current Hava Amina.
Right, okay.
Right? And so they
Perfect.
say, yeah, right now you're supposed to think that just as Rashi thinks shlichut is like an intuitive, like you don't need a ribui, it's actually just like intuitive that Chatzer could form a shlichut. So too, the
Right.
same works for Yad, and it's only later that we see it's different.
Agreed. In other words, the Gemara here doesn't know that Gemara there. And when it suggests that the explanation for Rav Yochanan is that we learn it from Yad, even though it sort of takes it as being like an obvious an obvious thing that we could learn it from Yad, even though we don't have such a limud presumably anywhere in Shas, we have this Natan b'Yada limud, but the Gemara assumes that there could be such a limud, and Rashi is just defending the Gemara. Okay, I'm just pointing out the what you might call wonkiness of it. I just thought it's an important Rashi to see. You know what? That's Rav Yochanan, and then we had, and then the Gemara goes on. So that's at this point, I think we can come in with Jacob and the first Tosfot.
Yes. I mean, there's a level that the first Tosfot is informed by the end of this whole sugya, but we can read it now.
Yeah, maybe you want to wait? We can wait, or
Yeah. I mean, it is informed by like the conclusion.
yeah, all right. So let's wait a little bit. Actually, there's another, so I'll keep going. There's another Rashi here. It says ki hechet de'eth, the next Rashi, ki hechet de'eth le'yad. Whenever she has a hand, ki hechet de'eth le'yad, she has a hand. Demishi yodat lishmor et gita. Whenever she knows how to presumably hold the get in a way that it won't get lost, miguleshet, you could divorce her. So a 10-year-old girl knows how to hold a piece of paper and says it's important, she can hold it. But a 5-year-old girl, you can't, or 8 years, I don't know, some ages you can't. And then the next part of the Rashi is Delo mi et rachmana ela shoteh or shotah. The Torah didn't exclude anyone from being divorced except a crazy woman. The mishalcha, that you send her away, v'chozeret, and she comes back. She has no idea that she's divorced. She doesn't really understand what it means to be sent away. She just wanders back, so that you can't really divorce her because you can't really send her away. Now, this is also a weird Rashi, because Rashi is quoting a Gemara. This you have in your old Zadar. He's quoting a Gemara in Gittin and in Yevamot, which the first one is one definition, and the second one is another definition. Rashi seems to say that they're connected. In other words, what's the connection between the fact that she can hold a get in her hand and that if you send her away, she won't come back? Like there's the daled there, I don't understand. Migoreshet, delo mi'et, the Torah didn't exclude anyone except a shote. Sure, that should be enough. She's not a shote, so it works. So there's another condition. Even if she's not a shote, she has to be at least have the ability to hold on to something, even if she's not a shote. So Rashi is bringing two different Gemaras with two different criteria, and I think he's saying you need both of them. Okay.
Is it that you need both or you need either?
I think you need both. Well, because of the Dalit, he's trying to say you might learn it that they're identical conditions, that anybody who knows how to hold get is also the kind of person who, when you send them away, will know what you mean.
I sort of read it as like, well, it's just about dat, and dat looks two different ways. Like a concern that we have two different concerns about dat. For a katana, our concern is like, can she even hold on to it and like keep track of the thing? And for an adult, the concern is, does she understand what's happening or not?
Right, but I mean,
but like the underlying concern is the same concern.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that there are two different conditions that they both have to be met or something. It's just that like, well, in each situation, there's like a relevant condition.
Yeah, but why does Rashi say Delomi?
Because
in other words, Rashi seems to connect them. What's bothering me is, why is Rashi saying that the one depends on the other? That's what's
because I think the idea from saying that
two separate Gemaras, they're giving two separate sets of criteria for two different cases, like you rightly said.
But I think maybe the thought is like, well, if we know that someone who's an adult but doesn't understand what's going on can't be Megureshet in this way, then obviously a katana who can't even hold on to the document, let alone understand what it means, right? Like there's some kind of logical link between the two, even if textually they're not.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, that's very good. Very good. There's another possibility. That he's saying, Delomi et Rachmana ele shote. That essentially shote is the only one the Torah forbid to give a get to. And therefore, there's no reason to forbid a child a priori. But there is another reason that some children we have to not allow you to divorce, those that don't have this criteria. In other words, that there's stages. The Torah didn't prohibit anybody except a shote. And then we have a svara that, yada, I don't know if it's also a limud from yada. I actually didn't look up the Gittin one. I don't know if anybody looked it up.
I mean, part of it, there's a bit in Yavama where we get the limud for this. And it seems to, on the one hand, it seems to basically be explaining that, like, it explains the limud he gave here of like, vishacha, anyone who you can send out and they won't come back. That's the mute. And then it seems the idea is because the pasuk had to do a mute of a shota, it implies that anyone else can be divorced with the yad. And
but
so
it's
almost, so I'm just saying that there the idea seems to be like, okay, a katana can do it just because if she's not a shota.
Exactly.
And then it seems like the Yodali Shmor Gita is like a separate thing, right? There's the element of,
exactly.
And then they're like, okay, but also she needs to know what's happening. So
that's exactly what I was trying to say.
Different elements.
That's exactly what I'm trying to say. That first of all, we have this miyut for the Torah's miyayet at the meshuga at the shota, and then that would imply that children are allowed. But all children are allowed. No, not all children. We also have this thing. But if the Torah would have miyet the child, then we wouldn't have even had this criteria that then children wouldn't be able to be divorced. So it's saying, "Delo miyet rachmana el shota." Don't think that the Torah miyet the child. It only was miyet at the shota, and the miyut for the child is only on some children that can't hold a get. Okay. And now the next Rashi is Mishum Shlichut it Rabbi. Did we get that in the Gemara? Yeah. So the Gemara, back to the Gemara again. Again. Let's start from the beginning. We didn't read that much. Amar Reish Lakish, Mishum Abba Kohen Bardila, Katana Ein La Chatzer, Vein La Arba Amot. Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Yanai Amar, Yesh La Chatzer, Veyesh La Arba Amot. B'mai Kamifligi, Mar Savar Chatzer Mishum Yadad, Rabbi. Ki Hechi De Itla Yad, Chatzer Nami Itla. Just when she has a yad, whenever she can acquire things, she can also have a chatzer. Whenever she can acquire things through her hand, in other words, she can acquire through her chatzer. Umar savar chatzer mishum shlichut itrabai. No, we learn it because of shlichut. We learn a chatzer not because of it's her like her yad, but because she can send somebody itrabai. Or someone can send somebody. I can send a shliach to do something for me, and therefore my chatzer can also do things for me. V'ki heche de shlichut leitla, and since a child has no ability to send a shliach, chatzer nami leitla, she also has no chatzer. Okay, so the Rashi there says mishum shlichus it rabbi. So what does he say? The Rabbi, the midirabi rachmana shlichut la adam kedetanya in Kiddushin Ram Aleph v'shilach. It says v'shilach v'shalcha. We learn three different things that you can send. That he can send a shliach, she can send a shliach, and a shliach can send a shliach. So there's a lot of ribui going on. So milamed sha'ish osei shliach v'shilcha milamed sha'isha osei shlichot. And he doesn't add the third one. The third one is that a shliach can make a shliach. Itrabai nami chatzera the havila kishlucha. Again, this is a limud that we don't find in Shas, but that's kind of what's going on here. Actually, if we take back the other Rashi that we talked about, where there's no real limud from Yada and the Bamidbar, it's like Rashi is inventing two new limuds. That's really what's going on. He's inventing two new limuds for the Gemara to be contemplating as being held by these two by the opinion quoted by Rav Reish Lakish and by Rav Yochanan. So that's what Rashi's doing. That's why we had problems with these Rashis, because there is no actual limud like that. But that's the whole point. We're proposing that there might be a limud like that. Okay, and now it goes on. The Gemara asks, could it be not inventing, but it has a Masorah? Rashi, it could be that he has a Masorah from his Rebbe. I mean, yeah. But I'm saying he's inventing in the sense that he's not quoting from a known Gemara or a known Medrash or something. He's filling in. He's creating. I mean, I can only, in literature, we attribute the first reference to something to be that person's creation, even though we can't actually know that. But yeah, he could have a Masorah from whoever, from the times of the composition of the Talmud. Yeah. Mi ikaman the Amar. They say, who was the first person to learn with Rashi? Is it his Rebbe, Rashi's Rebbe? How did Rashi's Rebbe teach him? Anyway, mi ikaman da Amar chatzer mishum shlichus it Rabbi. So here's an interesting thing: is there really anybody who says that shlichus is the way we learn chatzer? V'atanya biyado. Here, maybe I'll let somebody else read, because I get it. You guys will all fall asleep if I just keep reading. So Sarah, you read.
Okay.
And keep us away.
I'll try. Vehatanya biyado inli yado yado gago chatzero v'karfifo minayin Talmud lomar hamtzeh tumatzeh mikol makom. This is parallel to what we saw before, yeah. Oh no, no, this is about.
It's similar. It's similar.
It's similar, but it's not exactly the same. Okay, fine. So we have a breita.
What is it talking about? Biyado. Biyado. What is that pasuk referring to?
That pasuk is about theft.
Exactly. You found the or the item was in his hand and he didn't bring it to the Beit Din, but we took it from his hand and now he has to pay double.
Yeah.
Right?
So if we found it, like we cut him like literally red-handed. But how do we know that he still
What
has
if you found it? Well, I'm going to say it wrong, and then you'll correct me by reading Rashi. What if we found it in his chatzer or in his carpeto minayin? What about all those other places? We found it there. How do we also know those? So the Gemara goes on. Talmud lomar himatzei timatzei mikol makom. See, that's the just Aaron. That's the mikol makom that we had before. Also, it goes. That's how you read it. Talmud lomar himatzei timatzei mikol makom. Wherever you should find it, he'll have to pay double. Now Rashi, look at Rashi. Last week we did a shir in Rambam. This week we're doing a shir in Rashi.
So actually, no, we're not talking about if we find it. We're basically like he stole the animal by leading it into his chatzer and then or letting it wander into his chatzer and shutting the door.
Exactly. And why doesn't he say what I was saying?
If we found it in his chatzer?
Yeah, why can't that be the pshat?
Because
right, Rashi, wait, let's just wait, let's just emphasize this point. Maybe not everybody got it. Wait, where is it? First of all, on yado, he says, im himatzeh timatzeh biyado. That sounds like he found it in his hand. But he means in his reshut. There he means reshut. Gago chatzero v'karpeto minayin she'im nichnas sham. The animal, what is nichnasa? It's nekeva because we're talking about a behema. The behema nichnasa.
Caused the animal to go in there.
The animal led there. No, she went in. He didn't know about it. He just was smoking his cigars. And then he sees an animal go into his chatzer. V'na'al b'faneha legonva, in order to not to give it as a hashavat aveda, but to steal it. Shehu chayav, that he's chayav on paying double. So, right. So what is the alternative? Rashi could have said like me. No, you just meant to say you found it there. Why does Rashi go to this lengths of saying it's not that we find it in the chatzer, it's that he used the chatzer to acquire it by locking it into them. That moment that he locked it is when he became the owner.
Because if he just put it there, then we don't need if he grabbed it and then took it there and locked it in himself, then the kinyan happened much earlier.
Right, and it's obvious that he'd have to pay. In other words, if I have a sheep in my house and an earthquake happens, my house falls down, and my sheep wanders, and I stole a sheep and I put it in my house, and and the earthquake happens, the house falls down, the sheep wanders off, and then, I'm taking an extreme case, and then the Beit Din sees that sheep and says, "Oh, it's Shmuel's sheep." And Nachum we have video of it in Nachum's house. We have video that he had taken it. So I still have to pay double. It doesn't really matter where you found the sheep. It just matters that it was in my possession. We don't need a ribui to teach us that also in other places that you find it. It's that acquisition can take place in other places. That's what Rashi, because it's obvious. Of course, the sheep doesn't have. You don't have to find if a thief steals something and hides it under in the Reshut Rabim in the ground, or I don't know, behind a tree, that he's still his. He took it, so you still have to pay double if you get it back. I mean, if it's found out and proven. Okay, go on. Ve'isal chadaitcha.
Ve'isal chadaitcha chatzer mishum shlichut is Rabbi. Im kein matzinu shaliach ledavar avera v'kaimal an ein shaliach ledavar avera. So, if you wanted to say that, or you might have thought that if the chatzer is based on shlichut, then it would seem like in this case of theft, we would end up saying that you could have a kind of form of shlichut for dvar avera, because you could do gneva via your chatzer, and your chatzer is a kind of shlichut.
Right.
We know that that's not true. So therefore, that can't be the reasoning for why. like kinyan chatzer would work.
So go on.
Okay, Amar Ravina, Heicha Amrinan de in shaliach ledvar avera, Heicha de shaliach bar chiyuvahu, aval v'chatzer de lav bar chiyuvahu mechai be'sholcho. Okay, so Ravina says, when we said ein shaliach ledvar avera, we were talking about a situation where the shaliach can be, like, is a bar chiyuva, like, could be obligated and paying.
Look at Rashi. Look at Rashi here. Another Rashi problem here.
Okay. She'afhu muzhar al davar al hadavar. Hatam patur.
Oh, so wait a second. What does bar chiyuva mean?
He too has the, I mean, at least is the way Rashi is described, right? He's muzhar al hadavar. He's like,
right.
Also, like, lo tignov applies to him too.
Exactly. He's mitzuvah. We would say he's mitzuvah. He's also part of the group of people that are commanded. He's a bar mitzvah.
Right. Hatam patur hashaliach. The amrinan le divrei harav divrei hatalmid divrei mishomin v'lo hayalo lasot. So.
No,
because it's about that kind of person
that so strong. Divrei harav, divrei hatalmid, divrei mishomim. Kidu. Obviously, you're going to listen to the Rav.
You should listen to, and not to your.
And what's the Rav in this case? The Rav is the Torah, and not to the sender who's
telling you to do something.
Torah.
Yeah. And so you should know better than to do that.
Because he is commanded not to do this. So he has two commands on his head. One from God and one from this Mishaleach. So he should be ignoring the one from the person because it contradicts the one from God. So Rashi is talking about if he's mitzuveh. Okay. Aval b'chatzer in the Gemara. Aval b'chatzer the lav bar chiyuva.
B'chatzer the lav bar chiyuva hu mechayev shlocho. So, but a chatzer, it doesn't make any sense to say the chatzer is mitzvah.
Yes. God doesn't command courtyards.
God doesn't command courtyards. That doesn't make any sense. So there we can say that there's sort of, we can avoid this whole problem of shaliach l'devar aveira, because actually, like, the principle of ein shaliach l'devar aveira only applies in a case where the shaliach is himself bar chiyuv, but the chatzer can't be that. So then we don't have to worry about this problem of ein shaliach l'devar aveira. Can push that aside.
Okay, so exactly. In other words, it's true that ain't shliach d'var avera, but this kind of shliach there is l'dvar avera when the shliach is not mitzuvah. If you tell a monkey go and do something and he does it, then if I don't know if there's shlichuts in monkeys, but if there is, then you're culpable, not the shliach, because he's not mitzuvah. Go on.
Elamata ha'omer le'isha ve'eved su'u gvuli delev nechiyuv aninhu hachinami de'mechayev shulchan. Okay, so if you said to a woman or to a slave, go and
wait, translate elameata.
If you thought that, you'd also have to think this other thing.
Exactly.
Right?
Based on your logic.
Right. You'd also have to think that if I went and told a woman or a slave to go out and steal for me, they're not bnei chiyuva. Ha'achinami de'mechayev shulchan.
And the mishalchan is not mechayev, is not mechuyav.
Right.
What is he talking about? The women are not commanded not to steal? I never heard that. Evadim are not commanded. They're not in the category of the people who are commanded to not steal. So look at Rashi. I mean, that's great. I mean, you go tell that to your friends, Abby Hoffman would be happy about that.
Okay, bar chiyuvahu. Oh no, sorry. Delav bnei chiyuvaninhu l'shalim keditnan. hem shechalvu ba'acharim p'turin. So, okay, so Rashi is saying they're not chayiv to pay because you can't make them chayiv to pay because they don't have any money really, right? Or they're not. And we know that also from Perka Chovel and Bava.
And you know what is this whole thing? Why are they not chayiv to pay? Did anybody look this up? Wait, Jacob.
I did not look this up.
All right, Jacob.
Well, the idea is they don't, like, a slave doesn't have money to be able to pay, and it's like a woman who's married also doesn't have that financial agency. So it's just,
and
if they
therefore,
don't have money, we can't obligate them at that.
and therefore, what would have happened if a woman would go or a slave would go and burn down his neighbor's barn? Who would pay?
The
Master.
Yeah.
Well,
And yet we don't want a circumstance like that, because then slaves would go around doing this just to be mean to their masters. And women, if they're frustrated with their husbands, would go around burning their neighbor's barn down, and just so their husband would have to pay, and they would suffer no consequences. So therefore, what did the rabbis do?
They
made them
decreed
liable
that-
after divorce or freedom.
Well, before that, they made the owner, the owner of the slave or the husband exempt.
Mhm.
First of all, they made the husband exempt. And of course, the woman, the woman is, the slave is exempt, and the woman, as everybody's exempt. Nobody's going to pay. We're not going to, really, it should be that the husband pays, but we're going to make them exempt, because otherwise slaves would have this big ability to damage their owners. Okay. By the way, I mean, I looked up this. Did anybody look up the whole question of how do we learn? What's the limud for Ein Shlichut Baravera?
Isn't it about like Shichutei Chutz or something?
Yeah,
I did look
Chutz and Me'ila.
well, basically, we have the idea of shnik tuvina bayin ka'echad, that like there's a couple cases of avera where we do see that there's shlichut, but we have various reasons we end up determining that those are actually exceptions rather than the rule. And by default, we then have this svara of divrei Rav, divrei Talmid, divrei Mishomim.
Okay, Lexi, you said it perfectly. Now I want to say it I'm going to ask my klutz kasha anyway, even though you just explained it all. Here's my, you know what a klutz kasha is? Everybody heard of this term? No? A klutz kasha is a kasha that you only ask if you're ignorant, because it displays that you just don't understand things. It's not a kasha in a real sense. It's just a kasha because you're uninformed, you misunderstood things. It's not even like there's a real answer for it. The answer is just this, just tell the person the way it's supposed to be. It's a klutz, like, is like, you know what a klutz is. A klutz kasha is a false kasha. So here's the false kasha. Why does Rashi quote Divrei Rav, Divrei Talmid, Divrei Mishomim? Let him quote the two psukim. We have two psukim that come and say there is shech devar avera in Me'ila and in Shchutei Chutz. Everywhere else, and there's two psukim ein malamdim. So everywhere else, we don't have it. We don't have shlichus, because we can't learn from these two psukim. So the Rashi should have quoted it as not a svara, but as a limud from two psukim. Why does he quote a svara? The svara is mentioned there, but that's just the beginning. At the end, they say, but why don't we have learned from this pasuk? And it seems like the conclusion is we do learn. For the two psukim, we don't learn. There's a two psukim that there is shlichus levar avera, but only those two cases. But in other cases, there isn't. So Rashi should have just told us that limud. Why did Rashi say what he said, which is that it's from the svara, which everybody knows? I mean, the svara is like the most well-known thing, but I'll ask as a kasha. But I warn you, it's a klutz kasha. But the real limud is from the two psukim. So Lexi actually answered it, but so I won't ask you, Lexi, but she answered it in one word, kind of. But yeah, I understood her. Why is this? What's the answer to this? Why is this not a good kasha?
I don't know if it's the answer, but it seems like the psukim were only for particular cases, right? They were not like a general principle.
Exactly. There. So what? That's my kasha. But we have a rule that says when you're given one general, when you're given one specific case, we do learn to all other places in the Torah. When you're given two specific cases, we don't learn to all other places. So that's the limit. We're given two places where we're told that there is a shliach of Avera. Implication, everywhere else there isn't. So that should be a perfectly good limit. Why does Rashi use this svara? So yes, everyone hears the question, yeah? It's a good question. It's kind of a good question. I scared you all by saying it's a klutz kasha, but it is kind of a good question. I mean, the question we have to ask ourselves really is what's our in Lexi's words, what's our default presumption about the world? Right? I think that's what you were saying, Lexi. If our presumption about the world is that there's that logically there should be a shliach devar avera, then I wouldn't need psukim to come and tell me that there's shliach devar avera here. So the default assumption must be that there isn't shliach devar avera. And then I need these two psukim to come and tell me these are exceptions. But the only way they're exceptions is if I have some kind of default presumption about the world that there isn't shlichus devar avera. And then I need the two psukim. And then the question is, why taka don't we go against that presumption? And then that's what we say. If we had one, we would have gone against the presumption. But since we have two, we don't go against the presumption. So since we have two, the presumption stays intact. But that means we still need to declare what the presumption is. And that's the svara, the declaration of what our presumption is. That we presume that there's no shlichus devar avera because of logic. Yeah? I'm just giving you the whole logic of it. All right, that's the Rashi. Okay, so where were we? Back to the Gemara. So Rashi, the other question here is that Rashi said, Lo b'nechi, he all of a sudden jumped from talking about whether they're mitzuvim, and then he says, well, they don't have to pay. Why didn't Rashi all along just say they don't have to pay? He could have said from the beginning, they don't have to pay, or I should say, the chatzer doesn't pay, right? A chatzer. Why did he say a chatzer is not commanded? Let him say when it says eino bar chiyuva, he should have said that the chatzer isn't culpable of to pay the price. And I could have read the Gemara perfectly well. Aval b'chatzer delav bar chiyuvahu, says the Gemara. The chatzer is not able to pay. Mechayev shulcho. And then the Gemara would ask, Elameata haomer leisha ve'eved su v'ganvuli delav b'nei chiyuvahu, that they also are not going to pay. Ninhu, they are not going to pay. Hachinami de mechayev shulchan. Then I should make the balim pay. The Gemara could read very nicely like that. And then the Gemara goes on. Amrat Armarta Isha va'eved b'nei chiyuva ninhu. No. Isha and Eved are b'nei chiyuva. Now, what does it mean here? Does it mean that they ninhu? Look at Rashi. Oh, no, that's the previous one. They are b'nei chiyuva. What does he mean? They do have to pay. He doesn't mean to say that we ever had a havamina that they are exempt, that they are exempt from mitzvahs. No, obviously and the Gemara is now saying no, they're not exempt from mitzvahs. The havamina was they don't have to pay, and now we're saying no, they do have to pay. Evid, but Isha ve'evid b'nei chiyuva ninhu fahashta mi haleit lehu l'shalmei. They have the chiyuv to pay. In other words, they're logically obligated in paying. They just don't do the paying. Right? Leit lehu l'shalmi. The Tanan. Nitgarsha ha'isha nishtachrer ha'eved chayavin l'shalem. You see that they had a chiyuv out there hovering over them in the firmament, and then when they finally do get divorced or freed, then they have to pay it. So the fact that they didn't pay didn't mean that they weren't in the category of people that have to pay. They were in the category of people who have to pay. And there was no shlichus l'davar avera by a woman because she has the ability to choose. And therefore, she has to pay if she ever gets divorced. You understand? So anyway, my question is just like, why did Rashi talk about it in the terms of mitzvah, and if the Gemara clearly is going in the direction of payment? I mean, I think that it sort of reads smoother in the beginning if to talk about mitzvah, and then later, I don't know. It's a pretty problematic Rashi, I think. If anybody has any thoughts. I don't know. Are my questions not things that you guys thought about, or not things that you guys are interested in? Yeah, Sarah.
I have a thought, but it might be too crazy.
Yeah.
You're liable, like if somebody, you're liable for stuff that happens in your own chatzer. So maybe it's that like you bear some. It doesn't make sense to say that the chatzer has to pay, but there's something about like you are. It has some.
No, we were saying the chatzer is not mitzvah, right?
Yeah, you have to pay for it. You are, yeah.
Right.
I was trying to find some way where it like.
You know, you want to say maybe you are, the chatzer does have to pay. Well, the chatzer doesn't have to pay. You, the owner of the chatzer, has to pay. The chatzer is
Yeah, but like I qua owner of the chatzer do have to pay for things. And,
Yeah.
but it doesn't make sense to say that chatzer is mitzvah. That's like too far afield. But to say that there's like some financial responsibility for it or through it, maybe is more reasonable. I don't know. And so he wants to kind of pick the strongest reason at the beginning, and then like once the Gemara goes that way, then he follows it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's
Maybe that's too crazy.
no, it's not crazy. It's just I mean, I think it's certainly easier to read it in the beginning to think you're talking about mitzvah, and then you find out that it's different. Yeah, wait, Aaron, what do you got?
Yeah, just that am I frozen? No.
No.
The Gemara itself seems to be using bar chiyuva in two slightly different connotations, and the passage in which the
Well, I
we're
read
talking
it.
about-
I read it perfectly well as talking about chiyuv in the sense of paying, and it made
but
perfect
not
sense.
not all avera require paying. And so ein shaliach l'davar avera, when we're talking about bar chiyuva there, you could do an avera try to do an avera with the shaliach, and the question would not necessarily, unless you're talking about nazik, and the question wouldn't be about payment. So it actually doesn't really make sense.
Chiyuva doesn't necessarily mean payment. I was just using that as an example. Chiyuva could be also a chiyuv of lashes, of 39 lashes. That's still a chiyuva.
Right, but then meaning that would be muzhar. But the reason Rashi switches to bar chiyuva being about monetary compensation, about being about payment, is the Gemara then slips, where first the Gemara seems, the first part of the Gemara seems, when it first uses bar chiyuva, it is about.
You're saying mitzvah is more general concept, and the specific case of money is a subcategory of mitzvah in general.
Not exactly, just that the Gemara, it's Rashi, I think, by defining it differently in both places, what Rashi is pointing out is that the Gemara sort of seamlessly transitions from one use of bar chiyuva to another. The Gemara is actually not.
It wasn't seamless to me. It wasn't seamless to me because I jumped out of my chair.
My point is, it's not
when
like
I
Gemara,
read when I took Rashi's first shot and then I read the continuation of the Gemara, I was like, what are they talking about? Why would a woman not be mitzvah?
Meaning it's not actually seamless. If you didn't have Rashi, you might not notice that bar chiyuv actually means different things in different parts of the sugya.
Right.
And Rashi points out that without saying the Gemara is being fast and loose, he points out that actually the definition in the different parts of the Shakavatariya changes slightly. It doesn't make it not make sense.
I mean, that's my observation. But the question, my really question was, why couldn't you have said from the get-go? We're always talking about that it's bar chiyuva in the sense of whether you get the punishment for the crime, whether you are a person who is culpable.
Because then when it talks.
Because then, yeah, sorry.
Oh, just when it says because when it turns to late lahuli shleme, even though it is specific, you could say they're addressing the particular way in which they're not a bar chiyuva. Because the Gemara has switched over to talking about money, chiyuva does actually now seem to be talking about the chiyuv you have to pay the chiyuv in terms of having to pay back.
Well, for sure, at the end, it's talking about paying back.
Part of the interesting thing between the bar chiyuva and the mitzvah is that there's sort of different focuses as to what our concern is, right? Like the bar chiyuva, as in, are you someone who can be held liable for this? Is the shaliach someone who can be held liable for this? Feels almost sort of like more victim focused of like, if it's somebody who themselves can't be held liable, and we say then that the mishaleach is also pater, then you've just like left this category where this person can be harmed by so and just have like no recourse whatsoever, right? But on the other hand,
that is the reality, actually.
Right. Yeah. And so this idea of like a bar chiyuva being the necessary thing to say, oh, the mishaleach isn't chayav, it's the shaliach, would be like, yeah, it has to be pinned on somebody. You can't have a scenario where the shaliach isn't chayav because they can't be chayav, and the mishaleach isn't chayav because they're not the one who did it. Whereas the mitzvah, it seems to be more about the rationale of like, you can't say divrei harav, divrei talmid, divrei mishomim if there isn't a divrei harav for this person, if it's not something they themselves are commanded to avoid.
Right. Now, there's the svara lends itself to the svara of divrei harav definitely lends itself to mitzvah, and the onshim is like a different kind of is the next step almost. Yeah, I hear that. Very good. Wait, so let's go back to where I just want to wrap up the section of the Gemara here. What were we trying to prove at this point? We had just said, Ein shlich devar avera. How can you tell me you learned it from? How could anybody say that you could learn it from shliach? That would imply that there's a shlich devar avera because the chatzer could be like the thing that acquires, and then he's your shliach, and then he's a shlich devar avera. And then Ravina answered for us, and he said, "No, hecha damrina ein shlich devar avera, hecha de shliach bar chiyuva hu aval chatz b'chatzer delav bar chiyuva hu michayev shulcho." Then there would be shlich devar avera because he himself is not mitzvah. And then it goes on. El me'ata haomer leishto. That was our question on that about the woman and the eved. Tzu ganvu li delav b'nei chiyuva ninhu hachanami michayev. And then we answered. Amra isha ve'eved b'nei chiyuva ninhu v'hashta mi halet lehu l'shal made it not. Now, they are really chayev, and therefore that's why there is no shliach l'devar avera for a woman, and a chatzer is unique. And that's why we bring our bright at the Tanan. She nitkarsha isha nitkarsha eved chayavim l'shalem. They do have to pay in the end, and therefore you see that there was no shliach l'devar avera there. And then Rav Sama gives a different explanation. So let's take a break here for a few minutes, 5 minutes, and then we'll look at Rav Sama. Okay, so Rav Sama gave a different reason to differentiate between why by a chatzer, why we could still learn shlichus, a chatzer from a shlichus, and why nevertheless there wouldn't be shlichus of devar avera because a chatzer is different. And what does Rav Sama say? Rav Sama Amar. When do we use that, apply that rule of boy avid, or when do we apply it? Boy avid, boy lo avid. When a person can or cannot do, can choose to do the thing. See, the first opinion was saying when he's commanded or when he's culpable, however you want to learn it. But now we're saying no, it's when he has the ability to choose, when he has free will. Aval chatzer, the bal karche motiv ba, that against its will, in other words, it doesn't really have a will, but it doesn't have the ability to prevent what you put into it, motiv ba. You put into it things against its will. So that's why the mishaleach is chayev. In the case of Geneva, let's say, with his chatzer, like Rashi said. And then we bring, right, and then we're going to try to figure out what the difference is. But at this point, it just sounds like Rav Sama is talking about your volition, whether you have volition or not. That's enough to differentiate a chatzer from a person. And the Gemara will go on to discuss whether he means volition or moral choice. Right? Here is just a pure case of volition. But that's enough, really. A chatzer has no volition. Does he really mean that's the distinguishing fact, or is it more about your moral choice? All right. So we got a long way from this Tosfot, but this Tosfot at the top of the page, Rabbi Yochanan Amar Yeshla Arba Amot. So Jacob, take us through that.
Yeah. So this Tosfot does reference stuff that we'll learn a bit later, but we can still learn now. So Rabbi Yochanan Amar Yeshla Dalad Amot Tema Dilkama Masik Mishum Dielef Metzia Miget Alma Shaykh Kinyan Dalad Amot Beget with Perak Hazorik Kama Rabbi Yochanan Krovla Afilu Mea Ama the Cholalish Umro Have Get. So this is surprising. What Rabbi Yochanan says here, because we conclude later on that we learn that he learns Metzia, the halachot of Kinyan Metzia for a katana from get. So we see that Kinyan Dalad Amot is relevant with get, and I think it's also important to emphasize, our discourse has been focused on chatzer, and I think Tosfot bringing up the Shaykh Kinyan Dalad Amot, part of it is refocusing on that aspect of how this was framed with what a katana can inquire with. But we see in this sugya that Kinyan Dalad Amot is relevant with get, but in Gittin, we see that Rabbi Yochanan says if it's close to her, even 100 amot, and she's able to guard it, it is a get. And so, want to just interject with the toast what I sent over email here, that there's so Mashma the Yalef Metzia Meget Mashma de Beget the Rabbi Yochanan Ena Migaresha Elatoch Dalad Amot.
Wait, where are you reading?
So I sent an email Tosfot on Gittin Daf Ayin Chet Amid Bet Divrei Machloel Rabbi Yochanan. It's just something that helps clarify the question. That it's the same question being asked in that toast, but I was just adding a line from that. Which it's clarifying that the implication here in
our sugya is that Rabbi Yochanan in our sugya seems to be saying only Daled Amot, not more than that she would be able to acquire. Whereas
If
in
you want to read that
Gittin,
Tosfos, go ahead. I just want to get it.
Hmm?
You want to read that Tosfos, or you don't want to?
I was just reading a line from it, and then we can look at the end of it to clarify some other questions that are brought up.
Wait, so can you tell me again the line that you want to read?
Yeah, the line was Mashma. So, Bekamar Hatam di Aleph Metzia Miget, Mashma de Baget Rabbi Yochanan Enim Migaresha Ella Toch Dalad Amot. So it's just clarifying what the question is, because the implication is that only Dalad Amot, not more than Dalad Amot, she would acquire the get. But Rabbi Yochanan says explicitly in Gittin, even 100 Amot she would acquire if she's able to guard it. So the answer we have brought in our Tosfot in Bava Metzia, V'yesh lomar dibidad amot shala afilu yachol lishmor kamoa begarashet. V'chutz l'dalad amot tzarich shetuchal hilis omro. And with Hagot V'tzionim, I have by the end, like tzarich shetuchal hilis omro, vilo who. So there's say that by Dalad, that her Dalad Amot, even if he's able to guard it like her, it's within her Dalad Amot. So the divorce is affected. Outside of her Dalad Amot, we need it to be that she alone can guard it. Can guard the get. In the Tosfot and Gittin, it brings another relevant question to that, based on the idea of Dalad Amot. Near the end of that Tosfot, it says Ve'od Kasha Derav Ashi Itle Hatam Bereshut Harabim Lo Tiknu Arba Amot. V'Hachatnan Haito Medet Bereshut Harabim Karovla Migarashat. So there's this further question that in Bava Metzia, Rav Ashi, I think we have Rav Sheshet, but Rav Ashi is the Girsa some other that Tosfot had. So Rav Ashi states that they didn't make this decree of Arba Amot and Reshut Harabim, as we saw. In Gittin, the Mishnah teaches the case where she's divorced, even 100 Amot. Well, 100 Amot is Rabbi Yochanan's interpretation, but that case where is in Reshut Harabim. So if it's close to her, she's divorced, but Arba Amot doesn't work in Reshut Harabim if we go by Rav Ashi. So v'yesh lomar the hatan ban yocholis omro v'hacha v'yocholis omro. There's one answer that our case in Bava Metzia, it's where he's able to guard it, and in Gittin, it's where she's able to guard it, and so that distinction of which one's able to guard it reveals who has possession of the get. Inami Yeslomar de Hacha Lav Dafka Nakat Reshut Harabim Ela Besimta Obetzide Reshut Harabim. Or else there's say that here we're not quoting precisely Reshut Harabim here. Remember the Tosfot's in Gittin. So here in Gittin, it's not precise about Rashut Harabim rather in Simta or in the sides of Rashut Harabim where Arba Amma would require. And just the Rashi, it has a different interpretation of what Rav Yochanan's teaching that makes it so we can't have Tosfot's interpretation of lo davar acher k'gon im zarak lo chov karov lo vavad the get hu debal korcha knuya la hilchas le alter have gita abba ba'ama lo. So, for example, if he threw to him his debt close to him and it was lost, the get it's only the get because of like kind of agunot that against her will she acquires it there. And
Wait, excuse me, where are you reading? I lost track of it.
Sorry, there was a Rashi that I added in the email that you had wanted me to look at.
Oh yeah.
So I'm reading that Rashi.
V'lo ledavar acher, that one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a case that the chov or the get is lost. The key, I think the key word is the avad in this Rashi. So when the get is lost, but it's still closer to her, she immediately acquires it, but generally not. And I think there's the idea of, if we get into this idea of the get being lost, I think she can't guard it if it's lost. And that challenges the foundations of how Tosfot is examining the case. If Tosfot is saying she's able to guard it, it's not lost. She's able to actually have it in her possession. And so Rashi, you would need a different interpretation, which I think I have. Because could we not say that the case in Gittin is by an adult woman, and our case in Bava Metzia is specifically by a katana, and maybe the rules for acquisition of a get are different between them? But
Well, that's possible, but not likely. But yeah. Wait, so can you just summarize what is the Tosfos's difficulty and how does he answer it?
So Tosfot's difficulty is the implication of our Sugya and Bava Metzia is that only Daled Amot would acquire.
And greater areas would not acquire.
Exactly. The answer is that the answer Tosfot gives is that if
and that's not a kasha. What's the difficulty with that?
Well, the difficulty is it seems like because of Gittin, with Gittin, it seems a contradiction because in Gittin it says, Rabbi Yochanan says, even 100 amot she could acquire.
Exactly. So which is it, 100 or 4?
Mm-hmm. So the explanation is, without question, in her Daled Amot she acquires. If it's more than that, it needs to be a case that only she can guard it. Only she can really claim it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Excellent job. Good job. Thank you.
Yeah.
Josie, the next Tosfos is Josie. And And this was Talmud Lomar Himatzeh Timatzeh Mikol Makom. And this is in the Gemara, Batanya biyado ein li ela yado gago chatzero v'karpato minai. And how do I know anything more than the hand? Talmud Lomar Himatzeh Timatzeh B'kol Makom. Anywhere where you find it, or where it could be where it could be not just in the hand. Then it would be you'd have caught the ganav, and he'd have to pay double. Okay, so that's my intro for you, Joseph.
All right. So just to recapitulate, the context here is we're actually trying to show that yado is more expansive than just in hand. We've gone over this a couple times so far. Here we're going to look at a very specific hermeneutic explanation that we pull from the verse in Shemot that he quotes in Bava Kama. Excuse me. So just to start with the actual text, Im Tamar v'nema himatzeh timatzeh klal biyado prat, b'chlal v'prat ein b'chlal ela mashe b'prat. So if you should say, we would say that this is an example of klal ufrat. And going back to Shacharit this morning, which I slept through, unfortunately, but other mornings you learn the 13 principles. We have a rule in hermeneutics that if you have a generalization and a specification, we only learn from the specification. We don't learn the entire generalization. It says, so we would read this as himatzeh timatzeh is a klal, biyado in his hand is a prat, so we would learn this only to be very restrictive in his hand. So we're going to respond to this. V'yesh lamar shedi yado ben himatzeh timatzeh v'havale klal ufrat uchlal k'da'amrina b'murba. This is this very long and winding sugya that we have in Bava Kama, where they go through and they really do tear apart why this particular pasuk is interpreted to be expansive, because there seem to be so many repetitive and redundant words. And without going over to, I mean, that would be an entire shiur in of itself, because they pick apart, how would you look upon this verse as where is the klal, where is the prat, are there any other klalim that to be applied here? But to get to the net, as we might say, in this, the conclusion of this long sugya in the Gemara, where they take apart and try to figure out how to make the individual words, where you have which one could possibly be redundant, why each one is there. Chaim Shnayim Mishalem. The maskama is that kol makom she'atem motzeh shnei klalot hasmuchim zeh lazeh hital prat b'neihem. So there's this rule, this additional hermeneutic principle, that if you have two klalim next to each other, then you would, and then followed by a prat, you can take the prat and insert it between the klalim, and therefore you have a klal prat klal functional group. And from that, you can interpret the rule of hermeneutics would be, you would be able to re-enable the klal here. So the klal here is would be himatzeh. You would find, and
when you re-enable the klal, though, you re-enable it ke'ein haprat.
Yes.
So it has to be domeh to the yad in some way.
Right. So motzeh shnei klalot hasmuchim zeh lazeh hital prat b'neihem. The kain b'samuch gabe get, which we learned with the get, the marbe gaga munachat biyada. So we have this notion that connecting a get that falls on a woman's on her roof, effectively, you throw it on, under her roof. It is considered as if it were her hand, and she acquires it. This is the extension. This is where Tosfot is extending this klal prat klal to take yado and make it expansive into anything that is your reshut. Yesh lamar, and then you can additionally respond to this by English, shalcha chazer v'chol, and then going to the get case, which is the ki kachish isha, v'natan biyada v'shilcha mebeto, v'natan biyada v'shilcha. You have natan is the klal, yada prat, shilcha is additionally a klal. That you can then once again here we have this additional connection saying that because over by get yada is expanded to be her reshut, here in the same way yado is expanded to be his reshut.
All right, so why is this? So just summarize for me. Why is this not a klal uprat?
So
in our case of himatzeh timatzeh.
Right. So this is the whole sugya in Bava Kama, which
No, you don't need the Bava Kama. What? How are we supposed to learn it?
How are we supposed to learn this? We're learning himatzeh biyado timatzeh.
Oh, exactly. That's what Tosfotim says. V'shadi yad. That's when he says in the first yesh lomar. V'yesh lomar shadi yado bein himatzeh timatzeh. You know, in the middle, it should read it like himatzeh biyado timatzeh. So there you have a klal uprat to klal. And therefore you do learn to everywhere, but it has to be ke'ein yad.
So it has to be something that is like yad, something that has to be functionally similar to yad.
Yeah.
That's how we expand that. That's how we expand it. To me, this seems a little circular, though. It's like you're saying it's ke'ein yad, so we're going to expand it to reshut because reshut is ke'ein yad. And so we have to take the Gittin case to show that yad is expanded to, the marbed gaga. You take the Gittin case to say here yad is expanded to her roof, which is in this case sort of a paradigmatic for her reshut, her roof, right? Is to be considered like.
No, I think he's just bringing examples of other places where this principle of being able to take the prat at the end and sticking it between two words earlier applies. And he brings one case in Perek Merubah, and then he brings also by get where it says shalcha v'shilcha, and then you could put right. So he's just saying also there you can answer in the same way. I don't think he's trying to talk about how we learned it from Gittin, but your question is just like about you. Why did you think it was circular? What was your question about why it's?
You're saying it's prat ke'ein yado, right? That's the prat. So we have yado is our specification. So we have to have things that are like. Somehow like.
What does it mean to be like a hand?
What do you mean ke'ein yado? And when you say that, what do you mean? Right?
Yeah, I think. Yeah. What do you think it means?
Well, to me, it means something that has to be functionally like your hand, and you're expanding hand into what? Into things that you have some.
Well, I think it has to be like your hand in the sense that you shomer it, and therefore it has to be a chatzer mishtam. Hey, what's in your hand? You know about and you guard. So therefore, it has to be a chatzer mishtameret. It has to be something mishamer. Guarded, yeah. So I think that's the idea, that it has to be like the hand in that sense. But so we're definitely expanding.
The set of things is the set of X such that X is guarded.
Yes, I think that would be the best example of what does it mean to be like a hand. Yeah. Okay. All right, thank you. Yishar koyach. Perfect. Moving right along, we have another Tosfos, and I asked Sarah to prepare this. And I think this. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You were going to say something about it.
Oh, no, I don't need to give. You'll introduce.
Okay. I mean, I think there is you sort of said this to me in an email, but I think there's a way in which this explains like a wide swath of text that's not only kind of the lines that they're quoting. So, okay. So we'll get the question on the table to start with. So just so we remember where we are, this is the objection that it can't be that chatzer is a kind of form of shlichut, because we had this drasha based on a pasuk that was about theft, and it seems like chatzer does affect a kinyan for theft in the case where there's like an animal that wanders in. But we have a general principle that says there's ein shaliach l'davar avera, so that seems like that presents some kind of problem. So that's the objection that the Gemara is making, and then the Tosfot would have a question on that objection. Okay, so they say v'im tomar ma tzarich lehochiach mikoach ein shaliach chulei amai lo mochiach mid'itra by chatzer mikra de yado kidu v'samuch gabei get mochiach de chatzer mishum yada itra by. Okay, so here's the basic question. Why are we bringing this objection based on ein shaliach l'davar avera when we could bring an objection from the fact that the verse, from the fact that basically we could just respond by supporting the original position that chatzer is based on yado. And the reason that they think that this is kind of a good kasha or a good question is based on something that comes later in the Gemara, right? So,
Wait, clarify a little bit more. Wait, what was our objection? Back to the Gemara. It said, "Vatanya ein biado."
So the Gemara's objection was, it seems like when we, right, there are sort of two options. Chatzer is either a form of yad or it's a form of shlichut. If it's a form of shlichut, then
Then you have shlichut l'davar avera.
Yeah, then we maybe have a problem with ein shaliach l'davar avera, because it seems like chatzer does work for davar avera because of this pasuk about the animal that wanders into your chatzer. Or the drasha that reads the pasuk that way. And so then it seems like we would have a problem because it seems like chatzer does work for gneva, but we generally say that ein shaliach l'davar avera. So that's the question that the Gemara is asking. The Tosfot think this is a bad question, basically, or it's the wrong question, and that we should just be
What is the stronger? What's a stronger question? What's a stronger question?
They think the stronger question is, right, they want to say, amai lo mochiach mid'itra by chatzer bikra de yado. Why can't we just do like a careful darshaning of the pasuk in order to show that chatzer is
I thought he meant, maybe this is what you're saying. I thought he meant just that, like, we do have a drasha that says we learn chatzer from yado. So why are you telling me we learn it from shlichus? We don't learn it from shlichus. We learn it from yado. We learn it, and therefore,
right. So I think it's
this.
It's like a little more specific than that, right? So it is saying, well, we have a drasha that learns that it's chatzer comes from yado. So then why does once the Gemara, right, the Gemara puts forward these two kind of svaras for the two opinions, then it should be able to just reject the shlichut one by saying, well, we have a good pasuk for the other one. We have a good drasha that like grounds the other one in the text, and so we should be able to toss this one out. But the Gemara doesn't do that. The Gemara goes on this like much more kind of complicated logical roundabout in order to say, oh, there's a problem with ein shaliach l'davar avera. So that's I think the Tosfot's question.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, but then they're going to kind of support like why their question is a better question. Because right later on in the Gemara, it says, we talk about gabei get mochiach de chatzer mishum yada itrabai midi itrabai mikra de yada lo avid shum halchacha. So later on in the Gemara, like a few lines down the page, we say that a get can be, you can be kona a get through chatzer based on a drasha on the word yada for a woman, right? So that's in Dvarim. And the Gemara there doesn't seem to need to bring some additional proof of the principle. It seems like that proof kind of stands on its own. And so Tosfot think, well, that should be enough to do what we need to do here. We shouldn't need to go on this roundabout thing about ein shaliach l'davar avera at all. We should be able to just kind of rely on careful reading of the psukim, and we don't need this logical adventure. Okay.
Good.
People clear on the question? Yeah. Okay. So then we're gonna give their answer. V'yish lamar de besamuch mikoach hatana mochiach de marbe gaga v'chatera kiyada lehitgaresh afilu b'ar korcha o afilu hiktana. So, later on in the Gemara, we get the idea that
I think I would translate it as not mikoach. I think it's like from like I
Mocha.
think it's like a double lashon. Machach mochiach.
Okay, yeah.
He surely proves that the Tana surely proves.
Yeah, it just seems like
I never saw that expression before, but
yeah,
I think
it seems like a kind of strange construction if that's what it means. But anyway,
yeah,
I think
I
that either
know.
way it kind of ends up being the same thing, right? That like
Yeah, it doesn't really matter, but I think that's what it's saying. I think that's why I would actually, you know what it is? It's based on the previous Tosfot that you can take the word at the end and stick it between the two repeated words. So what he did, he went to say mochiach, chochiach,
yeah,
atana.
and then he just
And then he thought, oh, I'll put that
I'll
in
put
the
that in as a
middle
like elegant little maneuver. Okay.
to remind us
Yeah.
of the previous Tosfot. I think that's what's going on there. That's
Sure.
a joke. That's a joke, but I think
I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay, so fine. So, but we learn that she can be divorced even against her will through her roof or her chatzer, just like she would kind of if you gave the get directly to her, and that works even against her will or even if she is a minor. Ve'im imitam shlichut lo hayta mitgareshet val korcha velo ketana. But if Chatzer worked through shlichut, then it wouldn't be the case that she could be divorced al korcha or if she's ketana.
Why?
Because you can't have a shaliach that you send on a mission against your will. It doesn't make any sense.
Against his will, against the shliach's will.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think that's
doesn't make
right.
any sense. That's
Yeah.
illogical.
Shliach,
And
it has to be like
right.
It has to be like the exactly. It has to be with the will.
Right. It has to be right. Like the whole concept of shlichut seems to rely on like me appointing someone to do something, and it doesn't make sense for me to appoint someone to do something against my own will. Like that's circular. And the ketana can't
against my own will. You're right. You said it correctly. Yeah, against my own will.
Yeah, against my own will. Right, because the chatzer is the shaliach for the woman.
Right, and it would be as though it's a shliach against your will, but the whole concept of shliach is that I willed this person to do this thing.
Right, so that doesn't make any sense, and it similarly doesn't make like a ketana can't make someone her shaliach. This seems to be so. Therefore, that logic doesn't work. But here, and I think by well, I'll read it and then we'll say what I think it means. So, but here, by gneva, we can't use the same kind of drasha that we used for get, because there's no, even if he's doing the theft with his own hand, he's like got it in his own hand, it doesn't make sense to say he stole it against his own will, or if he's a katan, because he's not of age. So this little this idea that we have for get seems to be localized to get, and it can't be extended more broadly. So that's why, in theory at least, this claim that there could have been a better drasha that we could have used in order to reject shlichut doesn't work here, and so we do need this like long and convoluted kasha.
Wait. So can you rephrase in your own words? Rephrase the question and the answer.
So the question is, why did we bring an objection based on ein shaliach d'var aveira when we could have just relied on a drasha from a pasuk?
A drasha to prove what?
to prove that Chatzer is based on Yad.
Okay. And why don't, and what's his answer?
And just to kind of add to that summary of the question first, right? The other piece of the summary of the question is, it seems like forget the Gemara later on the same Jaf seems to say that Chatzer is based on Yada. And it doesn't need to bring some additional proof. So therefore that drasha seems to stand. So I think that's kind of what the Tosfot have in mind when they say, oh, there's a better drasha. But then they say, oh, well, this thing that we said about get is localized.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't make sense to apply it to the more general case about the case about Gneva, because there's no, while we can say that she's divorced against her will, we can't ever say that you stole against your own will.
Mm-hmm. In other words, we couldn't use, I'm just rephrasing. You said it perfectly now. What you're saying is that drasha there was specific to teach us specific qualities about get, and therefore that drasha, like you said, is localized. It's specially about gittin, and the fact that we learn that a woman can have a chatzer and be divorced by the chatzer is a special din in gittin. And we can't expand it to a general rule of chatzer everywhere, that everybody has a chatzer and outside of gittin. And how do we know we can't expand it? Because over there, it said all kinds of special things that are only applicable to gittin. So we know that drasha is a gittin drasha and not a general drasha about chatzer. Is that good?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, so like, one thing that's interesting about that is it does seem like
what are examples of those things that are different? Sorry to interrupt. I'm interrupting you. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So what is different?
What are examples of differences? This is the Balkarcha issue.
It's Balkarcha and Katan or Katana, right? So that it's maybe there are other examples of a kinyan that works Balkarcha.
Right, and this actually comes out. This is going to come out actually that a Katan doesn't have a chatzer and a katana does.
And that does, because she has to, because we know that she can be divorced.
Exactly, because this drasha is only talking about gittin, and if it would be talking about everything, then a katan would also have a chatzer.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't we?
One thing that the like Daf Yomi podcast I listen to sometimes raised was when they talked about this, I don't know, a month or two ago, whatever, was that maybe it's just that like we sometimes call what's going on with a get a kinyan, but like, especially with a minor girl, it's not really a kinyan at all. It's some other.
It's a special din by get.
It's a special din. And so it just has different kinds of rules, and it's not, we don't
But you can't acquire against your will. But you can acquire get against your will.
Right. What does that mean? So kinyan is kind of the best language we have for talking about what's going on, but it's not actually the same thing. But then I think the Tosfot are kind of saying that, but the Havamina is that we wouldn't ever think that. We think that all kinyanim kind of have to work.
Right. I think that's 100% right. I think we did talk about that in our class at some point. I don't remember, my memory isn't so good, but I remember we did talk about that. It's like, you acquire, we talked about this idea that you can acquire it, but it's not really a kinyan. In other words, we call it kinyan, but it's like almost a borrowed usage. And maybe it was about
like almost the opposite of saying like, it's not an acquisition at all. It's just that we call the process by which you become divorced a kinyan. Right. And it's not an acquisition. It's not meant to be an acquisition. And then that avoids all these problems of like, how could it possibly be that?
And quite beautifully
acquires things.
And in marriage also, a man doesn't acquire a woman. We use the word kinyan but it's not. He doesn't own her in any way. She's right. She's a free person. She doesn't. You can't acquire. We don't. It's not slavery. So, but yet we use the word kinyan. He can't sell her to somebody else. It's not that he acquired her. So we use the word kinyan in marriage, and it doesn't mean kinyan. It doesn't mean what we would think about by other objects. We just use it because it's a borrowed usage. Yeah, because we're trying to say that there's some. I mean, the truth is the kinyan of a marriage, I think, it's like kinyan, khalifin or something. That I have to do some act to make a chalut, to make this thing actually occur. It's just some action to make this thing occur. So the same thing by a get. But there by the get, she actually does have to sort of. I mean, there's a little bit stronger that she has to acquire it. She has to. V'natan. Oh, that's yeah. It was with my chavruta. I was talking about this. Sorry for my memory comes in bits, but I was saying not the drush of natanla. This was my kind of chiddush with my chavruta that natanla. It's not a kinyan. There has to be a natina. There has to, and therefore she has to get it. But it's natanla, so it's a kfilo even against her will. We call it kinyan because it seems, like you said, it's the closest thing we can come up with. But it's you can mekayim the v'natanla without necessarily being a kinyan. All right, thank you, Sarah. I think we'll stop here. The next Tosfos I didn't assign to anybody. I didn't quite know what to do with that Tosfos, the next Tosfos. I don't know if you looked at it. I don't know what his point is. He just brings that ancient of Arvera. Well, actually, maybe we'll do it next time. Actually, maybe I do have a point. I'll do the next Tosfot, and because I didn't assign it, and then we'll pick up with the other Tosfots, Aaron and Jessica. And hopefully we'll finish this until the Mishnah for next week. And then in the remaining time, in the rest of June, all I want to do is get to the next, from Mishnah to the next Mishnah and end there for the year.
We're not going to touch the Mishnah and Kiddushin that you mentioned?
Oh, yeah, maybe we will. Yeah, maybe the Mishnah, what I think the whole page.
42b.
It's a whole
Rav
page.
Nachum?
What?
Rav Nachum, could you also just email us maybe a list of the dates for the next few classes, just so we know what the schedule is for the rest of
Because
the
of Shavuos? Is there Shavuos on a Monday?
No,
Shavuos is not on Monday.
Uh-huh.
Shavuos is, I think, Tuesday. Arab Shavuos is Tuesday. Just
Tuesday night,
so we know
Wednesday.
what date we're going until, so we can plan for the summer.
Yeah. Well, usually we go to the end of June, but
Okay, great.
that's the general. Wait, let me stop that.